Good morning, everyone. Are we ready? Okay. Very much welcome, guys. I'm so excited to be here, seeing all these many faces deciding, to pick this workshop over the other. So thank you for coming. I know this is going to be just before your lunch break, so I'm going to personally make sure to keep you engaged throughout, so absolutely. So we're going to have a super hands-on session today. We're going to be discussing, the $1 billion question, So how do we help organizations, to really, move from this, hyper-experimentation of AI to really, embracing a value-driven enterprise-wide adoption of AI, And I'm Davide Palanza. I'm a research manager for IDC. And as an analyst firm, what I keep doing constantly is really eavesdropping a little bit, what is the global commentary when it comes to artificial intelligence. And I'm going to tell you, there's definitely a shift. I think based on the surveys also that we collect, that there's no questioning anymore around, what's the value of AI, really. I think the question is really, how do you turn, your strategies into actionable results? And I see myself, professionals, practitioners like all of you, struggling a little bit to demonstrate ROI expectations, I was just talking to a CIO from a North American insurer just a couple of weeks ago, and still, resonates with me what he said to me. He mentioned, I feel like sometimes we are at a stage where if I don't constantly prove progress to the board when it comes to AI, I'm going to have a target on my back, So the way we shape these conversations with our Microsoft co-workers today is that really we wanted to create something that would be meaningful and valuable for all of you. So just make sure, to max out the opportunity to engage, with the peers and exchange notes and create really an open, trustworthy and really respectful conversation. So let's make sure that everyone's voice gets heard. So a little bit of housekeeping. So I'm going to start with a little bit of an introduction just to set the conversation. And I'm going to be sharing a couple of data points around what we are seeing from IDC standpoint when it comes to the value scale opportunity of AI. And then we're going to talk about a little bit where we see organizations stack right now and what is going to need to happen to move forward along the maturity spectrum. And then we're going to break down into conversation. This is going to be the most exciting part. I'm going to be floating around for any of you that might need me. And basically, we're going to dig deeper into the 3 major action items that organizations will have to explore. So we're going to have people talking about strategy, governance, and technology costs. But don't worry, I will brief you a little bit more in details just before. Okay, so let me just start with the first slide here. So I thought long and hard, what would be the best approach to start today. So I think, maybe a sizing of the market would be overdue. So based on a recent publication from IDC, we estimate that the AI is going to generate a cumulative global economic impact of $19.9 trillion. Just to put that in context, I know it's a staggering number, but just to put that in context, China's GDP is $18 trillion. So this is the second biggest economy in the world. But when I was looking at a little bit, underneath this data, what really struck me, what really, stuck with me is the fact that if you break this number across different buckets to understand what is going to be the impact, you really realize that when we think about AI, the disruptive nature, the disruptive power of AI doesn't really come from, the direct impact of AI. So the revenue that AI solution and service providers to generate by offering those products, it really comes from the indirect impacts. So the ripple effects, the shock waves that AI brings to the AI supply chain. So let's think about, I've seen a guy from Cisco. So let's think about network services providers, data infrastructure providers, data services, security services providers. So all those organizations that do offer back-end supplies to AI providers. But let's also think about adopters, right? So in this big number here, we also captured, the value that will be generated by organizations that will be, targeting AI applications somewhere along the value chain to unlock productivity, to unlock, revenue growth. But also, And this is, I think, for me, the interesting bit. It is also going to be impacting, the economy on a foundational level. So here we also have an estimate around the induced effects, so the impact to the household income spending. Just to give you a pointer around this one, we all know through LinkedIn and so on and so forth that, AI professionals are going to definitely have a higher paycheck. So that is, also attracting here. So long story short, we do expect, that organizations will try to benefit from these revolutions, and we do expect here in IDC that there's going to be a new transformation buzzword out there. We talked about digital transformation. This time we're going to be talking about AI-fueled business transformation. What does that mean? Basically, it means that we're going to see organizations that will be leveraging AI to really generate value through the development of new products and services that will be AI-powered, or through the overhauling of internal or external processes that would be autonomous in a way, or maybe through the molding of the experiences that orbits around our organizations, the experience with consumer, the experience with the employees or with the business partner. So you might wonder, okay, so there's going to be this huge new transformation that organizations will go, and what's the time tag? What's the time frame for all of this? Well, here in DC, we have a little bit of an estimate, a best estimate around that. So we expect that organizations will go through 3 major stages of transformations in this journey. So we're going to see experimentations, we're going to see adoption of AI, and then we're going to see acceleration. So our expectation is that those organizations that will be able to tackle the barriers of AI, and this is the scope for the conversation of today, are going to be those organizations that will be able to be positioned to become AI-fueled businesses by 2027. So such an exciting time, because that means basically that 2025 will be a watershed moment for the whole world. And, where do we see Europe and all of this? So according to our surveys, most European organizations today are stuck into that initial stage, the experimentation stage. We called it the generative AI scramble. Why is that? Is that because, when we think about, through our surveys, about what happened after the ChatGPT explosion, what we saw is that there was so much rushing, rushing to allocate budgets to experiment and see, what the fuzz was all about, that I think, something weird happened, because we've seen, that there was so much rush, and that led to fragmentations, duplicative efforts, a lot of dispersion of efforts and energy. We've seen, that obviously, I cannot blame CIOs over there, because obviously you wanted to understand, and explore, and learn about this technology better. But obviously that lack of focalization and cohesion really led to a lot of dispersion. And just to give you a couple of numbers, to give you a little bit of a magnitude about that, in IDC, we estimate that in 2023, average organizations have been exploring hundreds of use cases. But out of those hundreds of use cases, only 39 were the POCs that were actually launched. And out of those 39 POCs, imagine 5 were the only production launches that we've seen. So as you can follow the math, there's a lot of value that gets lost in the process. And obviously, that has huge implications in the way that senior leadership will create pressure, obviously, to keep investing in the way they've been doing. And there's, unfortunately, right now, really low tolerance when it comes to project failures in AI. So that's a little bit, I think, for me, the initial setting of the conversation. So what are we going to do now? So basically, here at IDC, when we talk about this shift from generative AI scramble to enterprise AI adoption, let me give you a little bit of a pointer in terms of what I mean by that. So as you can tell, when we say generative AI scramble, we basically entail this phase where we've seen that the conversation around AI is only about generative AI. As if all the things we learned about AI before, they all disappeared all of a sudden. The conversation is around generative AI, mostly around productivity-based use cases, internal-facing use cases, grounded into the department, so there's no sharing whatsoever across departments. And these are, not really generating much value, Whereas when we think about AI adoption, what we mean, is that we're thinking about, having multi-departmental use cases that might be linked to not just simply, productivity use cases, but really, revenue generation opportunities. And we're thinking about hybrid AI. We're thinking about chaining, generative AI with traditional AI to really, get added value for the business. So we're gonna basically talk about three major conversational pathways, let's say action areas to explore to make this leap from experimentation to adoption. One is going to be around strategies, and for those of you that will be talking about strategies, what I really would like you to explore is really, given the hundreds of use cases that organizations on average have been exploring, what are the super use cases? Those use cases that are bound to get the maximum business opportunity and that you consider to be feasible based on the prior investments of your organizations, based on complexity and so on and so forth. And also, obviously, how to make the strategy not short-sighted. So how do you think a strategy, AI strategy, should be informing and building on a technical debt mitigation strategy, ESG strategy, and all the rest. Whereas when it comes to governance, here, I see that we have 3 tables dedicated to this topic. I mean, governance it cannot be an afterthought when we think about disruptive and transformative technologies like AI. So the conversation I would like you to have is really about, how do you bring the whole organizations together, so that, the reality check with legal and compliance doesn't happen as an afterthought, but it has to happen as soon as possible. Also, maybe governance-related topics that I would like you to explore is how do you bring people with you? How do you shape a vision around people? I just want to share this data point, which I think is really telling. We recently asked people, what are you concerned around generative AI? Top leaders, as I said, mentioned, lack of developers, in the cost when it comes to generative AI, and having, those getting out of your hands. But you know what, middle managers told us? That they are afraid to get replaced. So we need to have a, common communication strategy when it comes to, what's going to be the impact of generative AI. And the last conversation area is around keeping technology, at bay, so keeping a rein on those costs. And maybe what I would like you guys to explore is really, how you think the deployment strategy should vary based on which criteria, should we always buying the solution? Should we always building the solution? Should we find something in between? And how should we personalize this strategy based on the use case? And a little bit about, how do you scale, when it comes to generative AI, how do you scale those assets to be able to, create efficiencies, synergies, and consistent decision making that can build on and create economies of scale, really. So I think the introduction has been provided, so I'm super excited to see all of you looking at me. I really feel the enthusiasm for you to be here. I'll be floating around, so just in case you need me, guys, just ping me and I will be there. And have a great conversation, all of you. And then also an applause, so guys. Hello, hi there. I'm sorry, but time is up. We need to wrap it up. So, hello everyone. You guys are so deep into the conversations that you don't really even notice me, but that's a good sign. I'm happy that you're having fun. Anyhow, what I would like basically to do now, guys, is we would like to basically reconvene a little bit, debrief together. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to ask the facilitators if you could just really squeeze in 2 minutes what you think are the most salient statements that were shared during the conversations. I would like to start maybe with the strategy tables. So maybe I would like to start with this one on my right. Maybe if you could just share really in 2 minutes. I'm going to keep the time as well.
Hello, good morning, everybody. I'm not going to do it longer, so then we can go for lunch. But our assignment was AI use cases, how to prioritize them. We had a lot of insight. So basically, everything comes down to customers and operational efficiency or operational excellence. So we basically were discussing about these two topics. When we talk about customer growth, we talk about customer satisfaction and creating new revenue streams. So these are very important when we need to prioritize and also how to reduce costs, right? And we also discuss a bit where to start, back office or front office. And we see the enablement of starting with back office to enable then front office. With a question for one of the persons here, is that not too boring, right? So shouldn't we just take risk and go to and open our doors and go with customers? So that was the start of the conversation. And then to prioritize, we talk about, now I can read the board, how to align with the strategy, how to deliver short-term value, the return of investment and the technical feasibility. And the feasibility, we also talk about desirability, sustainability, and viability. So I think that's quite interesting. And the last question, I think on the last topic we were talking is when to evaluate the risk. When is the right moment to evaluate the risk when you are prioritizing use cases? And here, it was suggested maybe do it with the stakeholders at the beginning, involve them so they can have a voice and they become a sponsor, not just people giving opinions, and then involve them at the end so they can provide the feedbacks when the solution is deployed. So I think that summarizes the discussion.
Thank you. So maybe now let's switch to the other strategy table. And good job for the timing.
Hello. Our key takeaways were we were working on how to prioritize AI in organization and how to make it fit to the strategy. So first up, we need to find the areas of major impact where you want, where you can actually measure and you can actually put your bet on AI in implementation. And we have a case here of a company where the AI council was created who would be like governing prioritization, decision-making, and like building a real case of AI-centered business. And in my company, we also had a run to a project of reskill and upskill to make people AI compatible. And we made it as one of the key demands for people, like AI being the must-have skill and tool and mindset they have in daily implementation.
Okay, great. So now maybe let's pivot to governance. I think we can start from this table over here on the center.
Hi, so we have a very interesting conversation and we are a very diversified group of different industries. So it was nice to see that we have some things in common and some of the things that we were discussing is about how do we make sure that we have a proper governance in our companies to be able to tackle innovation, and there was a lot of discussion about this, trying to be innovative, but at the same time put some guardrails, because in our industries the risk is different. Some of the ideas that we have about how to do this was about some of the members of the table had specific units that centralize the governance, centralize the processes, and they are able to help individual products to tackle this challenge of not being a bottleneck, but at the same time being an enabler and put the right guardrails. And we talk a little bit about like some risk like data quality and also if we are having the right infrastructure, like being like cloud, where are we in this adoption of cloud?
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, so perfect. Yeah, the other governance table. If I'm not mistaken, it should be a governance as well.
Yes, so at our table we had the question about how do you promote adaptation rather than just adoption, and we came to the conclusion that one of the most important factors is to take people along the journey and actually also to free up resources. So for example, in my company, or I'm the team lead of a digital adoption team, so our whole role is about educating people talking about their fears, bringing use cases, back to them, helping them with everything they need help with, and that it's also really important. We talked about the push and pull factors, so that it's important to give people the opportunity to educate themselves, and then to also make a educated decision on whether it's something for them, to make it also during these educational sessions very tangible for them, so give them use cases they can really implement in their daily work. Just checking back, I don't know if you want to add something?
Pretty much.
Okay, then I think that's everything from our table.
All right. From our table, the takeaways were, first up, responsible AI. If you are on a roadmap, thank you, Bug. If you are on a roadmap with your clients, things you have to set up are themes like, okay, how can we be transparent in the use of AI? How can we be inclusive? How can we avoid being prejudiced? Reliable AI is another thing, like how can we overcome things like hallucinations? And the end goal in that is to build an environment of trust. So a trust on the technology, but also a trust in the collaboration that you're doing with your client. The second topic is the placement within companies. AI is a completely new technology. And what we are seeing is that, hey, there needs to be a space carved out for AI within the company scene. And there are a couple of ways to do that. You can say, okay, we're going to treat everything like a separate project. We're going to try to align it with the current processes that we have within the business. Or we're going to work towards giving it a separate space within the company processes. And the third one, the third takeaway from our table was, basically to guide our clients in this Wild West environment that we are currently living in. We have the European EU Act. We have legislation being placed throughout the world. Everyone has their own set of rules. Everyone has their own starting point. And it is also very fluid. So the things that we are working towards with our client now can be obsolete between now and 5 years. And I think it's our task as providers of services to really help our clients in navigating those waters. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's shift gears now and let's talk about the technology piece, which is definitely front and center for many CIOs these days.
Great. Hello, I'm Simon from Science Park, Sweden. We talked about our three bullet points, and it aligns quite with the AI strategy to start with. We have been doing around 40 to 50 AI projects during the last 4 years, and we have never had a problem with technology costs. And our goal to not have a problem is that we often do this very simple one-to-one school graph. Value on one axis, the y-axis, and time and complexity on the other. And so we try to evaluate the AI project before we start them. How much value does this project create for the company? And by doing so, the technology cost have never been a problem. So don't start with AI strategy. Try to start with a one-to-one school graph. And then we follow a framework called CRISP-DM, where you put quite a lot of time and energy on actually understanding the problem and structured data. Because the technology part is a very small part of an AI project. And then, when we have done so, we can learn and set an AI strategy. And by doing so, technology costs have never been a problem. And also ensuring a quite high adoption rate of the actual projects. Great.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, let's head with the last table.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Daniel. I'm going to try to summarize everything from the top of my head. So we're also talking about costs, but in our table it came more the discussion of, all right, we want to talk about costs, but we first need to say, okay, what are our needs? So how is our infrastructure? What kind of data is available? What are the needs for processing of the data, you know, to either reach bronze, silver, or gold layers? And then what you have that is, based on the infrastructure you have, if there's any available already, what kind of platforms can you adopt from that, you know? So those were our main questions. So there are all these open questions for someone that is trying to adopt AI for the first time. So it's like, how can you come to that decision of knowing what are your challenges, how much you really want to spend on it, and then at the end is like, okay, now that you maybe have everything ready for it, how can you come up with the use cases that are going to generate the most value for your money? That was our discussion.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so now the hard task goes on me because I'm gonna have to wrap it up for all of you. So I've been listening as well, you know, all of you talking, and there's actually so much that should be discussed, and I'm literally in awe, all of you, because it's such a great opportunity to get to hear people working on the field, you know, and hearing your thoughts. But I'll try my best to wrap it up for all of you. So there's definitely, I think, for me, one theme that came up from the conversation that is, you know, the simple fact that we're talking about moving away from experimentation doesn't mean that we have everything figured out. The opposite. The theme here is that as we move, you know, we just have to change a little bit our mindset in the way we think about experimenting, because obviously technology, the nature itself of technology is such that, you know, it's going to keep evolving and changing, you know, endlessly. So what we need to be thinking, you know, is how do we want to cope with that, you know, complexity, with uncertainty? And there's one statement that the lady there, the blonde lady on that table, I really like what you said, because she said, there's so many moving targets. You know, one day we are after cost efficiency. I think you also touched upon that. Another day is about revenue. You know, how do we deal with this complexity? You know, and I think, you know, the answer is easier sometimes than we might think. You know, it's really about putting your business strategy first, regardless to the, you know, random technologies that are happening out there. So, in a nutshell, I think for me, the key theme that I would like to share is like, start from your business strategy. So have a hard think around where you think your industry is headed, and based on that, start to think about how technologies will help, you know, removing the frictions to get there. So don't come up with a tool-specific strategy. Just think about, you know, how you're set for success based on your strategy, and then, you know, all those new technologies will find a place in that. The second piece I think I would like to share that I really liked is that idea that, you know, okay, so we need to move from experimentation. So definitely I heard someone saying that having a AI-ready infrastructure, obviously it's super important. Having a platform, so a platform is not just a tool, it's a mindset. So having an ecosystem-based platform so that we can, you know, collaborate across departments and create efficiency, and using AI assets as assets that we can scale across departments. That's always super tricky and important. But I like the point that I think it was in that table here again, that I really liked. They talked about so having these multidisciplinary teams working together. Some of them call the AI Council. Some of them call it, you know, the Center of Excellence. But I think in a nutshell, the idea is that we should thinking about having people coming from different backgrounds, you know, legal, compliance. I always insist on them because they don't sound sexy, but they need to be part of that. So we need to have them on board right from the get-go, so that we won't have to, you know, and stumble along the way, you know, and having that, as I said before, the reality check sooner rather than later. But also, let me say one thing which is super important. We also have, I mean, we need to come up with this, you know, cross-disciplinary, you know, multi-departmental teams, but we also need to remember that these teams don't have to operate as shadow compliance departments, shadow organizations, like they exist, but they really don't, you know. We need to remember, like, and being, you know, thoughtful around, how these teams will collaborate with other departments, because that's also super important, because if something happens, we need to have clear escalation procedures in order to understand, and work through the issue and make sure that it won't happen again. Another point that I liked, and then I'm going to wrap up, I guess is the people part. I always think it's an important it's an important element. If you think about it, AI is, I think, Amandine, you were talking about this as well. AI is designed by people, with people, for people, right? So let's always never forget that. How important it is to make sure that when we think about technology, we go back to, thinking the persona that is going to be using that technology. Because we think, just to give you an example, if you think about, I don't know, maybe a coding assistant. Does a senior coder actually need that? Maybe yes, maybe not. Or maybe think about call center automation. Maybe a junior person might need it better because obviously it doesn't know about the products of the organizations, or maybe a more senior professional might not need that as much. So let's always remember when we think about technology that there's going to be someone along the line that will have to use that piece of technology. So let's make sure that we start from the end and then reasoning like backwards, right? So thank you so much. This was a lot. I'm super, super happy, though, about the nuggets that we've been sharing. I'll be present in this conference for the remainder of the 2 days. So if you have any follow-up questions with me, please feel free to reach out. But let me also ask all of you to acknowledge the Microsoft guys that we've been talking to. They have a specific booth here in the conference, so also make sure to point all your questions to them. It was a pleasure getting to know all of you, and it was a pleasure having this conversation today. And yeah, let me just probably share the last slide with my email in case you need them. And also, the Microsoft colleagues have also worked on a couple of slides for sharing some digital materials that we'll be sharing back with you. So in case that you want to get the presentations, don't worry, that will be figured out somehow later in the day. So absolutely, have a great rest of your conference, and talk to you soon.